Aloha friends, I'm Zendo Kern, Planning Director for Hawaii County.
And I'm Keith Okamoto, Department of Water Supply, Manager Chief Engineer.
Great to be here with you today. Today we're going to be talking about updates from the Department of Water Supply with a specific focus on the 2018 Kīlauea volcanic eruption.
Yeah, thanks for this opportunity. We're happy to share the latest of what's happening with our list of projects associated with that event.
Well, let's go ahead and get started. You know, I really wanted to kind of get into an update on the projects. You know, there's a lot of infrastructure that got destroyed during the 2000 Kīlauea eruption. Department of Water Supply received, close to $40 million in FEMA funds. We listed numerous projects that are, in various stages. And I think it'd be really important, for our community to understand where these projects are at. So can you give us an update to the best of your ability?
Sure. Well, so our initial focus, and it continues to be our focus right now, is the water line along Pohiki Road and Highway 137,
Critical.
which we're coordinating with Public Works. It's been a great collaborative process. My understanding right now is that they've engaged a consultant, so we're working with them.
Yep.
We've provided our conceptual design to the consultant, and basically the water line is going to fall within the road right of way. We understand that the process includes going through the environmental assessment process, which is what FEMA is in charge of.
Yep, they're in charge of that and currently conducting it and expecting to be out at the beginning of the year.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And our understanding also is at that point, once the EA is finalized,
Yes.
then the design can be finalized.
That's right.
So basically that's where we're at, and we're in constant discussions with both Public Works, HIEMA, which is the state civil defense agency, right?
Yep.
And FEMA.
Yep.
Basically, we want to ensure that we're doing all the right things. We're crossing the T's, dotting the I's, making sure that we are in no way jeopardizing the funding by any means. But again, the bottom line is we're going to be within Public Works roadway right-of-way.
Yeah.
So wherever that ends up being, our water line will follow that accordingly.
And just to add on to that, there's a concept that's out there that's kind of frustrating to some people, but there's this concept of you got to go slow to go fast. And that is, you really want to make sure that we do all our due diligence, right? We cross our, dot our I's, cross our T's, make sure we do all the consultation that we need to, get the environmental assessment complete and done. So once it's complete, then the construction can actually move forward.
Right.
Versus trying to shortcut it at the beginning.
Right.
Next thing you know, you start to get going and then you end up with problems, right? We've seen that before, and then the whole project gets completely derailed. I want to take this moment to really point out, though, I think it's critical because the community doesn't get to see what goes on on the back side of it. And Pohiki Road is not the easiest road to go down and put a water line down. It crosses over the rift zone. And so at the beginning of it, there's a lot of concern around heat, right? And what I've seen, and this is really, really important for me, just as a local boy from that area, I've seen Department of Water Supply, Keith and his team really elevate with their ways to try to navigate, over that heat zone using different type of processes, different type of methodology. And to me, that showed we're going to do what we can to do everything we can to make it possible. If there's a will, there's a way.
Right.
And to me, I just want to really, sincerely thank you. That's really been a big deal.
Appreciate it, Zendo. Thanks for that acknowledgement. And again, it's a collaborative process. You folks and the recovery team was really the glue that kind of brought everybody together, and we participated in the process, so we got a lot of this input, from the community. We heard what their priorities, what their needs and their wants were. So, at that point, then we could figure out, okay, now how can we make this happen? We do still have concerns about that heat.
Absolutely.
So we're going to have to think a little bit outside the box.
Yep.
The installation is not going to be typical
Yep.
water line buried in a trench, covered back up installation. Not only that rift zone crossing, but we also, expect some elevated temperatures down along 137 as well.
Yeah.
But we're cautiously optimistic that we think we have at least a concept that we feel should mitigate the situation.
Yeah, I'm really, really, really excited about that. So that's, Pohiki Road and Highway 137, roughly. 137's less of a concern on the heat element, right? And as you're saying, you're going to be in the right of way. So how about any other projects? There's a myriad of different kind of alternative projects. Do you have a general update on those?
Right, yeah, so a good resource is the county recovery website. It lists all of our proposed projects. I think we have a total of about 14 projects. 8 of which we've identified as priority construction type projects. What we've learned through this Pohoiki Road 137 process is that it became clear to us in communication with FEMA that the prudent approach would be to go out and hire a consultant.
Yeah.
But again, dotting our I's, crossing our T's, you still have to go back to FEMA and get their blessing to add that into the scope. So we've recently done that. We've recently got their blessing to go and acquire consultants 2 months ago, I believe.
Yep.
So we're in that process right now for the remaining half a dozen or so construction priority projects. And we're trying to spread it around, not just load up one consultant, because as we all know, we all have challenges with our resources.
Yes, we do.
So we're trying to spread it out. So we're in the process of scoping out the projects, again, continually having discussions with FEMA. What we got, the latest from FEMA, is that it sounds like they're willing to take the major role of conducting the environmental portion of our project. So we're totally glad about that.
Fantastic. So outside of the road that we've been working on, right, Pohoiki Road 137, that water line has been the primary focus of the large EA environmental assessment we've been doing. They're willing to take the role on the other ones.
Right.
Fantastic.
And glad you brought that up, because we are venturing outside of the inundated area.
Yeah.
But what we're trying to accomplish is we're trying to take advantage of this opportunity that FEMA has provided us. And a lot of that depended on information, from the buyout program, where people have gone or thinking of going to. And the information we got from that indicated to us that there's an opportunity here to take this FEMA funding and invest in the larger Puna region. So we're looking, our projects, if you go to the recovery website, you'll see where they are, but real quickly, they're in Pahoa Town, they're in Nanavale, they're down in Kalapana, they're in Hawaiian Paradise Park, and Kīlauea. And our focus on our projects is how can we improve redundancy, resiliency, how can we basically harden our infrastructure, maybe not against lava inundation anyway, but against a situation like hurricanes, power outages, earthquakes, as well as provide potential opportunities for, housing, economic growth in the region.
Absolutely.
So that's where our projects are focused on.
Which is needed. To underscore, it's absolutely needed, and I think the community knows that quite well. We touched on FEMA, right, and HAIMA, and they're really our partners in this process. And I wanted to point out that at one of our last community meetings in Pahoa, to give an update, they were here on site.
Right.
They were actually here participating, and they saw the community come out, they saw our engagement, and the feedback that we got from them was outstanding. But to have that FEMA team come over here and participate, it's kind of a big deal, right?
Right, I think so. I think so. I know I've been around for a little bit.
Yep.
I've gone through several
yes, you
incidents
have. Yep.
In my tenure here, and I can honestly say this is the first time we've actually had FEMA actively engaged after the initial consultation process, but during this whole recovery process, which, as we all know, is typically the long part.
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
And lava is a different animal too. It doesn't just come and go, right? So the event itself wasn't a hit and run type event. It was an ongoing event.
Correct.
And it was good to see the FEMA folks engage from back then. So I agree.
Super grateful for that. So thanks for that general update, and really excited to get into some Q&A. I'm sure you folks are too. So we're going to move on to Q&A now.
Alrighty.
So Keith, some of what we're hearing from the public is oftentimes we see Department of Public Works projects and Department of Water Supply projects paired together. It seems like this happens a lot with these projects. Can you explain, is it easier for the road and water line projects to be done together, or is there a connection there?
Yeah, so just generally speaking, typically with a road project, it's the prudent thing to do is to incorporate whatever may fall within that right-of-way with that road project, if possible. That's not always possible. But in a situation like this, where it's a restoration project, it definitely makes the most sense. You're gonna eliminate redundant work, you improve efficiency, and we definitely don't want to dig up a brand new paved road. right?
No, we've heard that many a times. Why would you want to dig up a new paved road? Put the water line in first with them, right?
Yeah, do it at the same time. It makes the most sense.
Absolutely. Yeah. And seeing that collaboration between you and DPW or Department of Public Works has been really neat, because I see both of you guys from the engineering perspective, how we fit it, how we make it work, and really trying to value engineer. And I think something that's really important is getting the most out of the money that we have.
Exactly.
Right? So that's what we're able to do with that, is to really value engineer and really create that efficiencies. Correct?
Exactly. Right.
So something else that we're hearing quite a bit about is the hot surface temperatures. So is this still a factor with the lava cooling out there? Is still concerns around that?
Yeah, we still do have concerns. Unfortunately, we don't really know what the temperatures are subsurface at this point, and I don't know if anybody really does know. We're only really going to find out, to be quite honest, once Public Works actually starts excavating for their roadway and their subgrade and whatnot. So yeah, we do still have concerns, but again, I think as we've mentioned in the past, we're thinking a little bit outside the box, and we're not going to do our standard waterline installation, which is buried in a trench.
Yeah.
That's like an emu. Growing up in Hawaii, you know how burying things can retain the heat.
Correct.
That's typically what would happen if there's still subsurface heat coming up, and we decide to backfill that trench over our pipe. It'll basically be like
cooking the pipe?
Cooking our pipe and boiling the water within the pipe. We definitely don't want to do that.
No, we don't want to do that.
Yeah.
And so part of that methodology is your folks' side of it, and the other side of it is Department of Public Works side of it on their engineering and their grading, right? So I think it's really neat how we have the consultant working for both folks, so we can really maximize the cut and fill, how much we have to take off and how deep we have to go to do our best to eliminate the depth, which conceptually would be cooler. The higher up we stay, the cooler it is, right?
Right.
But nonetheless, still a concern.
Right.
So, on another note, the questions that we get are, some of these projects are said to be backups, in case of a line breaks. Why is it important to have redundancy or looped systems? And maybe you can explain a little bit about what a looped system is.
Great, yeah. So, one thing that I think a lot of people probably can recognize is traffic, roadways, right? And now if you have a situation where a community is serviced by a single road, which is fine, right, most of the time, but now if there's a situation where that road is closed, and that's the only access, ingress, and egress for that community, and then it becomes more of a serious problem.
You get stuck. Yep.
So what a loop system will do is provide opportunities like a traffic grid would, and provide alternate routes. In this, for our case, it would be for the water. So say there's an incident, a break, some other isolated leakage, hopefully we can isolate that event, and everybody else around that is outside of the isolated event area will still be able to maintain water service to them. So it goes back to redundancy and resiliency.
And one of the conversations that we were having around this, and it was kind of neat because I didn't realize this, but Puna, from Kīlauea to Pahoa, actually has a unique ability to be kind of extra redundant with the wells and the source in Kīlauea and Pahoa. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Right. No, hey, thanks for bringing that up. And some people didn't quite understand why some of our projects were all the way in Kīlauea, right?
Sure.
So far from the inundated area. That's not even the impacted area. Why are you doing that?
Yeah.
There's a couple reasons. The first reason was we actually lost two of our sources in Kīlauea because they were actually handed over to the department, but they weren't constructed to the standards that we construct our wells to now. So basically, the long story short is they have potential to get contaminated by cesspool seepages and things like that. And of course, we don't want that.
We don't want that.
Yeah.
No, nobody wants that in their water system.
We had to abandon those two sources. So we're short two sources in Kīlauea.
Okay.
The beauty of the Kīlauea and the Pahoa systems, although physically, geographically, they may be quite far apart, hydraulically, our system has been designed and constructed so that they kind of match each other as far as elevation. And now that we have a water line running on Kīlauea-Pahoa Road all the way from Kīlauea to Pahoa, what we can do now with new well sources in Kīlauea, should there be an event like a hurricane, like Hurricane Isel, knocked out power to Pahoa region or whatever for a long period of time, our first bet I mean, our first option is to go to backup generators, but then you got to deal with fuel and other things like that. In addition to that, as a mitigative measure, with adequate sources in Kīlauea, we can now feed water from Kīlauea all the way to Pohoa, if necessary.
And vice versa.
And vice versa.
And that was amazing, and I was kind of blown away by that, and that's really unique that we actually have that ability in Puna. So really, really awesome. Thanks for sharing about that.
Thanks for bringing that up. Appreciate it.
So another question that comes up is some of these projects, like Hawaiian Paradise Park, happen to be in places that already have increases in traffic, especially during rush hour. How are these projects going to be done without major impacts to traffic? Great question, right?
That's the money question right there. And to be quite candid, any construction project is going to have some impact.
It does.
How we try to mitigate that is there's several approaches. One, of course, we try to engage the community even before we bid out the project to make sure they're aware of what's in the plans, about how long it's going to take. Right? Everybody wants to know when and how long.
Yep.
And then we try to engage them during the project as well, keep them informed. But we also have other means where we can operate outside of the peak traffic hours, typical 8:30 to 2:30 window.
Sure.
We can make that part of the construction process. We also definitely typically have to coordinate with either the subdivision road association in Paradise Park and get their feedback.
Yep.
Or if it's out on state highway or county right-of-way, we engage them and address their concerns and needs through their permitting process.
And in addition, having having that plan, we're actually able to utilize some of the looped road systems possibly too, kind of like talking about with the water line, right? So you guys take all those, really at the end of it, try to mitigate the impact as much as you guys can.
Right. And I think, as people are aware of what's happening, when and where, then they can pre-plan.
Exactly.
And I think Hawaiian Paradise Park is one subdivision that has options.
Yes.
Right, so.
No, exactly. So and that's why I think it's really important to be out here communicating, and I see you guys doing that so well. And like I say, people know they can prepare.
Right.
Excellent.
Right.
So another question that we get is, the FEMA money was given as part of the 2018 Kīlauea, recovery, but some of the projects don't impact the areas directly impacted by the eruption. Why are we able to use this money for projects like that?
Yeah, and that's something that's fairly new to us as well. I think it's a fairly new program with FEMA.
Okay.
If I did my homework correctly, it might have come about less than 10 years ago.
Wow.
And my understanding is it's what we've called it is the FEMA 428 Alternative Procedures Public Assistance Program. And what that allows subrecipients like us, so the primary recipients is HAIMA, the State Emergency Management Agency, and we're a sub-recipient. It allows us to have the flexibility to restore infrastructure not in the same exact place that it was impacted by the event.
Sure.
So it provides flexibility. The downside to this program is that they'll approve an amount and that's it. You're locked in. So
if costs increase,
that's all they're gonna.
Sure.
Yep.
So you have a finite amount of money to make all the projects work, right?
Right.
And I bet they came up with that because in certain areas they didn't want to put infrastructure back, right? They wanted to give the community the financial benefit of the loss, but said, maybe that's not the best place to put all of that back in. Maybe you take part back in, kind of like what we're doing, right? We got some going back in, but we're able to take quite a bit and put it in some other areas to really get the benefit of people that no longer live in there, kind of like we talked about earlier.
I mean, I don't know the history behind it, but it seems to make sense that that's a valid reason for the program.
Yeah, I don't know the history either, but speculation. It seems logical to me.
Right.
All right. Next question. One of the things I've seen on the list of improvements is a SCADA system being installed. Why are these remote monitoring systems important to our water system? And maybe you can explain what a SCADA system is. That's SCADA.
That's a great question. Let me get back to you on that. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, so SCADA stands for Supervisory Control and Data Acquisition.
Oh, good job.
Yeah, I did my homework before this. So, no, and that this technology has been around, but we're a little bit late to the game in implementing this technology. Basically, it allows our operators to observe the system remotely. So
Okay.
they don't have to physically be on a specific site to know what's happening at that site.
Wow.
You know, whether the pump is running, what the flow rate is, what the level in our tanks are, all that good stuff.
That's a big deal. I mean, that's so the resources that you folks have, which we're all dealing with limited resources. Instead of people driving all around, they could be doing that from the office, which is also saving carbon footprint, right?
Right.
So this is awesome.
It is awesome, and you know, our island's a little big.
So kind of huge, I like to say, but yeah.
So our operators need to travel quite far on a daily basis. So this would definitely help us with efficiency, and really, it's for the customer's benefit, and hopefully we can get ahead of things before they get to a point where we experiencing water pressure issues or even water outage issues. So it'll just help us do our job a little bit better, more efficiently.
Fantastic. That's really great news.
Yeah.
Okay, next question. You know, are we able to accelerate any of the steps of the process without jeopardizing the funding? We get this question all the time, right?
Right. And you know, the last part of that question to me is the key part of the question, right? Without jeopardizing the funding. Because really, you know, it would be a big disservice to our community if we did an oops and that 40 million became 20 million.
Oh boy.
Right? Or even worse, 0 million. So we're being very diligent in making sure, I think like we mentioned earlier, dotting our I's and crossing our T's, always being and again, it's so great that FEMA has been engaged, because in the past, we're kind of left to ourselves to kind of wing it on our own. And but with this event, we're continually having dialogue with FEMA and HIEMA. You know, I don't want to curse ourselves and say we'll be perfect throughout the process, but it definitely helps minimize, I'm hoping, things that fall through the crack.
It's that kind of partnership approach, right? We're actually working with them instead of shooting in the dark.
Right. And as far as accelerating things, you know, again, that's part of the communication. Where if there's places in their program where we can, we'll definitely try to take advantage of those. We're trying to do as much as we can that we know that will not jeopardize the funding. You know, things like community outreach, engaging all of our consultants concurrently and not hiring just one and doing it sequentially. Right? Because our projects, I think, lend us to that ability. Conceptual design, you know, we've all taken care of that in-house. You know, it's posted on the website. So we have a concept of what's there. We cannot nail down the final design and bid it out until we clear the environmental. So we don't want to shortcut that process at all. Definitely, we cannot break ground even to do planning type work.
Right.
Because our understanding is that would jeopardize funding as well. So, but again, all of this clarifications is what we're getting from this collaborative and the dialogue, you know, with the whole recovery team, our fellow agencies, as well as HIEMA and FEMA. So long answer to a short no. Sorry.
But you know, part of that is that what's going in is infrastructure that's long term.
Right.
You know, and that's really critical, which kind of leads to my next question. How is the growth of Puna being factored into these updates and the upgrades? Are we making conscious decisions to build not just for Puna now, but Puna in the next 20 years and into the future?
Right, exactly. And that's as much as possible, that's what we're trying to do. Of course, we all don't have that crystal ball. We don't know who's going to build, occupy, where, and when exactly. But we think our proposed projects, you know, if we're focusing on resiliency and redundancy, that will last for decades.
Decades, yeah.
And you know, we see our projects not only providing that resiliency and redundancy, but as a potential backbone for future projects to be built off of, you know, where those developments may.
We're seeing that. I mean, the park in Hawaiian Paradise Park, which
Right.
desperately needs it. Another example, right?
Right. So if we know there's something in the works, that helps us with our planning for our infrastructure and whatnot as well.
Awesome. Really appreciate you going over this Q&A with us. I hope this has been helpful to you. Keith, can you tell our community how they can contact you?
Sure. Call Zendo. No.
Call Keith?
You know, for water supply specific projects, again, the recovery website and the recovery team are an awesome funnel to get a lot of information through and from. But if you want to contact us direct, feel free to reach out to our website, recovery.hawaiicounty.gov, or you can call us at 808-961-8050, and I believe those numbers will be posted on screen.
They sure will be. And you can also reach out to the recovery division as well for anything. We're always here to help. It's been an absolute pleasure. We thank you for being here. We hope this has been helpful. We look forward to seeing you soon. Ahui ho.